Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this next session on bringing equality to life. I am personally very excited to introduce our next speaker. She is one of Salesforce's biggest advocates for equality. She is the community manager for the Trailblazer community, and she's also Global VP of Latino Force. She has led a fascinating career path here at Salesforce, and she's going to share her story and some insights with us here today. Ladies and gentlemen, Sofia Rodriguez Marta.
Thank you, Hannah, for the lovely introduction, and welcome everyone to the second day of Dreamforce. I hope you're wearing comfortable shoes and that you're hydrating, you feel awake. I'm really happy to have you all here. I'm here today to talk about my journey here at Salesforce and some of the observations that I have made as a leader of an employee resource group. Some of you might be here because you want to get started, but perhaps you're a little nervous, you're not sure of how to make an impact in your organization, or perhaps you're already well in your path to equality. And if you are, I thank you for that. You might find yourself nodding your head in agreement to some of the things that I say. But of course, this wouldn't be a Salesforce presentation if I didn't remind you to make any purchasing decisions based on what is currently available. Lucky for you all, I'm not talking about anything that you can purchase, so I'm making that pretty easy for you. About 3 years ago, I started my journey here at Salesforce. It's been the best professional career move that I've made. I consider myself incredibly lucky to have a job that I love doing, to be proud of the company I work for, and to have created a strong network of people around me, not just at the company, but at the community. About 6 months after I started, I wrote a blog post on Medium to share with my friends and family. I wanted to let them know how things were doing. In the blog post, I talked about the excitement of landing your dream job. I talked about the fact that everyone at Salesforce is really smart and really talented, so I struggle with imposter syndrome. I also talked about the need that I felt as a Latina in tech to open up the figurative doors that were keeping others out. And I also talked about the importance of making connections early on. The blog post got a lot more attention than I thought it was going to get. And so for the next couple of months, I received a lot of messages, phone calls, and folks were asking me out to go get coffee. Before I get on a tangent too much, I do want to say that if someone is asking for your mentorship or your advice and they're asking you for coffee, go to it. It's a really simple way to make a huge impact by sharing your Salesforce skills and your knowledge. But the reason I brought up the coffee chat is because in one of these conversations, the person that I was talking to ended it with, and I'm paraphrasing here, but they said, "Wow, thank you so much for the advice that you gave me. I can really tell that you have been at Salesforce for a lot of years. This is based on your knowledge of the company culture and of the ecosystem." Now, I was flattered, but I thought I had been very honest and transparent about the fact that I had just started. It was in the title. I had just started barely less than a year ago. And I'm actually about to admit something that I'm really embarrassed about. But I think it'll drive the point that not all of us start with the same resources, the same knowledge, or the same opportunities. So as we go on further in life, we don't have the same reach to those opportunities. So here it goes. Before I applied to my role at Salesforce, I'd never heard about Salesforce. I know. Why am I on stage? Why am I sharing this? I know. See, Salesforce is San Francisco's largest private employer, yet I had never heard of it. To my defense, prior to Salesforce, I was working in an education startup, managing their ambassador program. And before that, I was studying industrial engineering in a school in Southern California, away from the Silicon Valley. Sorry, it's like getting ahead of me. So while I was in school, I found myself involved in a program that focused on student inclusion. It was working on trainings and workshops and learning and development, all focused around how to make students feel included in their new environment. I loved it. I really liked what I was doing, and it was a side of me that I had never really realized, but it was just a hobby. See, I was studying engineering, I was working 2 jobs, and I was also volunteering at the same time. I was pushing myself to be my best. See, as an immigrant and as a daughter of immigrants, we often do things the practical way to ensure that the generation after us is exponentially better off than the generation that came before us. And in this way, often the children of immigrants carry the burden of the weight of the dreams of the generation that came before them. So I had to be better. I had to be better for everyone that came before me. And that's why I pushed myself, and this hobby that came along was just something that I did for fun. And some of you might be familiar with the generalization that American culture is individualistic. It's all about the self, about how you can do your best work. But I was raised in a collectivist culture, which is all about the group, family, and the community. So throughout my life, I had made a lot of decisions that were based around the community around me. So I found myself at a crossroads. A part of me was saying, go this way. It's the paved street. You've been studying towards this, spending money. It's a safe career. It's in engineering. Go this way. You'll be better off. But then there was the other road that was really rocky and really steep, and it was in an industry that was not really built out yet. So I think you can all guess what I did. I put on my hiking boots and wait for it. I blazed my trail that way, and I had a lot to catch up on. I had just gotten a degree that was irrelevant, and recruiters weren't hiring me for that. And as a recent college grad, I needed to have about 3 to 5 years of experience, because that makes sense. So I did a lot of free trainings, free workshops. I read as much as I could. And in that research, I found something called the Success Community, which is now called the Trailblazer community. Now, the Success Community, as I was reading about it, was something where Salesforce customers came to talk. They helped each other out in very technical concepts. They hung out with each other, so they went out to happy hours and parties and meetups, and they just wanted to be together all the time. And they helped out folks in the community how to learn Salesforce so they could better themselves. They also called themselves Ohana, which I thought was really weird. I thought it was like this weird PR thing. But I told myself I wanted to work for the best community management team in the industry. And I also wanted to work for the best community. See, for me, it was never about Salesforce or the Salesforce platform. It was about what the people could do with the platform. And so I interviewed for the role. I came to Salesforce. And one of the things I noticed right away was that it didn't seem like our demographic really matched the demographic of our customer base or of our city. And so I thought that to myself that was a problem. See, I personally believe to be successful as an organization that your employee demographic should closely match either your location or your customer base. It didn't, and I wanted to change that. But I was one person. I had just started. I wasn't anyone important at Salesforce. So what did I do? What do I do? And I thought back to how I was raised, the collectivist culture. So I thought to myself, go find a group of people who also want to make change. So I joined my employee resource group, and in there I felt a sense of belonging, and I found people who also wanted to change the numbers in tech. Now I want to share a couple of numbers with you to ground the rest of the observations that I've made in my time here. Salesforce conducted a workplace equality and values report in which they found that over 80% of business professionals believe that companies should deliver on social impact. Now I want to do a very informal, casual survey here in the audience. Raise your hand if you think that companies should deliver on social impact. Okay, that's pretty good. That's great. However, the same study also found that this isn't actually happening. About 36% of business professionals believe their company is actively working to be more diverse. Now, this is interesting because it's been found that diversity is good for business. It's good for the bottom line. Let's look at a study done by McKinsey & Company. They looked at the executive level, so the diversity in their executive teams. They found that with gender diversity, companies in the top quartile were 21% more likely to have higher profits. When we looked at ethnic diversity, they were 33% more likely to experience above average profitability. Again, this is just looking at the executive level. Imagine if we looked at every level. Imagine if we were intersectional in that research. That can be saved for another session, but what I did want to do here is ground this for the next things I'll talk about. So like I mentioned, some of you here might feel like you're just starting out. Perhaps you're a little nervous. You're looking at the landscape, and there's a lot going on. There's a lot that needs to be fixed. There's a lot that's broken. I want to share with you some of the things that I have found from the inside at a company working to change this. First off, diversity and inclusion. So in most companies or organizations, the people that are working towards the path to equality are in a diversity and inclusion department or a team. And sometimes it's just one person. But if your company has one of these groups, that's great. I won't share too much about my personal views on this, like the fact that the head of D&I, diversity and inclusion, should always report to the CEO, because otherwise I'm not going to get anything done. Let's be honest about that. Or the fact that if you are a founder or an entrepreneur, you should care about diversity from day one, because trying to fix it later on, it's way harder. It's not going to happen. But I digress. What I wanted to bring to the table here is that diversity and inclusion are so often put together that they have lost their meaning. What do I mean by that? So people assume that if diversity increases a little bit, automatically your employees are going to feel engaged, like they are included. It's not that type of equation. It doesn't work like that. Let's think of diversity as the numbers, the data. It's how many of X do you have. Inclusion is the psychological factor. It's how you feel like you belong. Let's think back to the hierarchy of needs. We need belonging for survival, so it's pretty key. But most of the time, we're forcing one department to do multiple functions. I'll put this into other terms. Picture your software engineering department and your marketing department in the same department. So software engineering and marketing. You have employees doing both things that have nothing to do with each other, but we're expecting it of them. I've also seen how being your authentic self leads to allowing you to do your best work. I've been at both ends of the spectrum of having a company where I couldn't really be myself and being somewhere where I could bring my full self. And see, that's something that happens in companies or organizations. There are people who have to constantly act like someone else. They have to hide parts of their identity that are core to their being. And so this takes a lot of effort. They're hiding themselves and not really bringing their best selves to work. I mentioned this study earlier, but again, in the Workplace Equality and Values Report, they read a couple of statements and whether they agreed or disagreed. Then they matched that to how employees felt like they could perform their best work. Let's look at belonging again. So if employees said that they felt that they belonged at their company, they were 5.3 times more likely to perform their best work. If they felt like they were able to bring their authentic self to work, they were 4.4 times more likely to perform their best work. Now, I don't know about you, but I think most companies want their employees to work really hard, right? That's affecting the bottom line. I've also learned that you should be purposeful with your offer to help. Most of the time, groups that are working in the path to equality are under-resourced and understaffed. And you should absolutely go up to them and ask them how you can help. But there's a way to be more efficient about it. See, each of you here have very specific Salesforce knowledge and skills. When you go to that group, they don't know you. You're the expert on you. You know yourself best. No one else does. So if you go up to them and you offer your very specific set of skills, you're going to be more useful to them and more efficient. This happened to me when I joined Salesforce. Within the first 2 weeks of joining the company, I reached out to our employee resource group, and I posted a pretty innocent question. I just wanted to meet some people, maybe volunteer once or twice a year. And employees reached out to me right away. one of the leadership members actually reached out, scheduled a meeting, brought me up in this conference room. We met, we said, hola, ¿qué tal? ¿Qué pasa? How are you? Great. How long have you been here? Awesome. What can you do? What can you do for us? I was shocked. I wasn't expecting an interview. I just wanted to make some friends. And so she really caught me off guard. The best that I could come up with at the moment was, I'm pretty good at getting stuff done. What do you need to get done? And they needed help with marketing. So they handed me Marketing Cloud on a platter, and I had to figure out how to use it. I released their first newsletters. Were they great? Were they the best? Probably not. I think someone else could have done a way better job. But I did help them. I did what they wanted. Could I go back in time? I would have been purposeful with my offer to help. I would have said, I have done training and development before, and I want to focus on employee engagement for all of you. So I'd like to host some workshops for Salesforce employees. See, when you're purposeful with your offer to help, two things happen. One, you're choosing what you're doing, so you're going to be more engaged, which means that you're more likely to stay a volunteer, and that's what those groups need. They encounter a lot of drop-off. We need as much help as we can get. And number two, when you're purposeful with your offer to help, you're doing something that you're really great at. You don't have to learn it. You're going to spend that time that you would have spent learning just doing it and helping them out. I've also learned that you should start off small. I think most of us can remember when we were starting out, it was really overwhelming. There's a lot that needs to be fixed. And a lot of the times when we have to do big, ugly tasks, we lose motivation. We tell ourselves that we can't do it, that it's too hard, I'll do it tomorrow. It's kind of like your laundry, right? You never want to do it. You don't have the motivation. But if you start out small, you're more likely to repeat it. And I'll give you some examples. Let's say business meetings. There's a lot of times that your coworkers or employees get spoken over or their ideas get stolen. It happens all the time. A very simple, hey, Andrew, it sounds like you're agreeing with Stephanie's idea, you know, the one that she gave at the start of the meeting. Hey, Stephanie, why don't you finish off and tell us what the next action items are? You just gave the credit back to Stephanie, and that's huge, and that's something that happens a lot. You could also join an employee resource group at your company, and if you don't have one, you can start one. Definitely happy to tell you how to do it. You can go on a 5-minute call, 10-minute call, and offer your Salesforce expertise to someone who needs it. This happened to me with Marketing Cloud. I was really struggling with why there wasn't a refresh button in one of my data extensions, and I couldn't find the answer. So I just hopped on the phone with an expert, 5 minutes. He figured out I was missing a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't know. I was just starting out. And for him, it was just a 5-minute phone call. He probably could have done it on his way to the restroom or his next meeting. But for me, it was a huge time saver, and it really helped me out. If you are an executive or a people manager, you're someone that has a lot of career experience, you could offer yourself for 30 minutes, do a hangouts, do a coffee chat, mentor someone from an underserved group, and help them out in their career. See, they often don't have the tools or the knowledge to navigate the corporate world. This has happened to me. I had a meeting full of executives where I had to pitch something to them. I basically had to convince them to give me money for something that we needed to do, and we all know how that goes. It's pretty hard. So I reached out to my mentor, and she's great at talking to executives. She does it all the time. So for her, walking me through it, giving me a couple of pointers, telling me what to do, was really nothing. You know, she was just speaking from her experience. But for me, it allowed me to have this tool set that I needed to really nail that meeting. So all these examples, what they have in common is that they're simple. They're really small. It doesn't take a lot of motivation for you to do it. So you start off small, little by little, you're going to repeat it. It's going to become a habit. You go bigger, and then eventually, you're doing the big, scary thing that you thought you couldn't do at the start. It's done. And there's some behavioral science behind why this works. I don't have the time to go over it, but if you're interested in reading more about that, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. I'll connect you with some of the research there. And I also learned that you should use your platform and technology. Here at Salesforce, we're lucky that we have a lot of great products and a great platform that we can leverage. but our employee resource groups didn't always have access to them, or what we needed wasn't created yet. There are a total of 10 ERGs here at Salesforce. If you meet anyone, I encourage you to ask them how they're leveraging their technology, but I'll go over some of these examples. So Outforce, our LGBT ERG group, they've done a couple of cool things. What you see over there blinking, we call that a lay. So what it does is that it's using Heroku. It's taking your chatter picture, your profile picture, taking it over here. It's going to add this cool little circle lay image. It's going to pop it right back to chatter. And as your profile picture is updated, it's also posting something in support of a champion month. So Champion Month is something like Hispanic Heritage Month, which we're in right now. And I can't tell you how heartwarming and encouraging it is to see all of these slays from all my coworkers. Like in Pride, there is a really colorful lay in support of the LGBT community at Pride, and that's something that's really easily done. They also worked on self-ID, voluntary self-ID. So internally, we have an app where we have an internal org chart. So you can choose to share your pronouns. And the nice thing about that is that that's right away telling someone that you are safe, that you understand, that you are going to welcome them if they haven't always felt welcome. And it's absolutely voluntary. Anyone can participate, and it's across the company. Asia Pac Force created something called the Ohana Network. Now, don't judge us too much, but every month we are hosting dozens of events. And we're doing this at a regional and global level. We're working on spreadsheets and emails and Quip, and it's not great. We don't have a lot of transparency. But Asia Pac Force saw that this was an issue, so they used the Salesforce platform to create the Ohana Network. Now, their whole team across the globe can see what's going on. They can work on their budget. They can work on event planning, and it's much, much easier. And the answer was right there the whole time. We just didn't think of using it. And Latino First Use Marketing Cloud, I had mentioned that earlier. I'm no longer doing the newsletters. Don't worry, we have a great communication chairs now. And what she's doing is that she's leveraging the technology to improve our communication. So we started out an employee welcome that has been improved as it goes on. And I don't know if anyone was at the fiesta yesterday, but just to show you the power that great marketing and comms have, we went from having about 150 people who wanted to come to having a guest list of 1,000 people. And that's what happens when you really leverage your technology. And I would not be a great community manager if I didn't encourage you to leverage the power of the community. Now, I know this seems like common sense, but I think it's a good reminder for any of you who did grow up in an individualistic culture. You can do a lot more in a group. And I want to show you a couple of examples of how the community has done this. So we have the Trailblazer community groups. This is supported and sponsored by Salesforce with their customer-run groups that are split up by job role, industry, and Ohana. The latter, Ohana, is incredibly passionate about causes like diversity, and they want to impact change. One of the most popular groups that we have are women in tech groups. This just started out with a couple of groups, and there are now over 80 women in tech groups. And just this year, they wrapped up their second annual conference called Witness Success. We also have Proyecto Tribo. This group was started by Latina women who were also mothers who found each other through the community, and they realized that Salesforce could be an agent of change. So they are now offering trainings and mentorship to moms who want to get back into work. There's also Pep Up Tech. I think some of you saw them in the keynote. Pep Up Tech was started by 4 women of color who wanted to change the numbers in the industry. They wanted to bring in more folks from the underrepresented areas into tech. And there's actually over 70 Pep Up Tech students. So if you meet any of them at Dreamforce, I encourage you to offer your mentorship to them, offer them some interview skills that they can really use. And there's also Ladies Be Architect. Ladies Be Architect was started by a woman in the UK who was in her journey to become a certified technical architect. In this journey, there were not a lot of resources, so she decided to change that. But she also realized that only 10 out of the 250 folks that were CTAs were women. So she decided to create Ladies Be Architect to change those numbers. This is by no means a comprehensive list. I know that many of you standing here or sitting here are actually part of groups that are doing something to change. If you're a part of one of those groups, feel free to let me know. I'm always needing new people in the community, so I'd love to introduce them to your resources. And finally, what I've learned is that anyone can have an impact on the path to equality, but most importantly, everyone should make an impact in the road to equality. You all have very specific Salesforce knowledge and skills that need to be utilized. We need you out there. This isn't just something that is a gender issue or a race issue. Really, it's an open invitation for all of us to create the best society that we can. And it starts here, it starts today, it starts with all of your knowledge and skills. I want to leave you with some learning after the session. If you are interested in how you can leverage the community, go ahead and take the Trailblazer Community Groups module. It was actually just released September 21st. So you might be one of the first people to take the batch. And if you want to learn about the business value of equality, go ahead and take this one. Feel free to take a screenshot. I will also share the slides later, but take that picture. I'll do a little Price is Right. There we go. Okay. So I started off with a little bit of my story. So I want to close with how it's looking now. As I look back at the 3 years that I spent at Salesforce, I feel an immense amount of pride to what our ERG has been able to accomplish. The past years have been really tough for the Latinx community. There have been huge natural disasters. There has been policy affecting our community, but we've been able to make an impact within our small community here at Salesforce. I've gotten the chance to travel the world, to meet a lot of people, and inspire others to use their Salesforce skills and knowledge. But really what I want to bring to the point here is that I started off feeling like I was just one person. Like I wasn't important enough to make a difference. Like I really couldn't do anything in the path to equality. And I found my group. I found my people. And I hope that if you are just starting out, you feel encouraged to do the same, to find your people in the community, to start off small and really leverage that power. And again, I want to thank you all for joining me today. If you have any resources that you'd like to share, if you want me to connect you with any of the resources I mentioned, let's stay in touch. You can find me on Twitter. But enjoy Dreamforce. Thanks so much.